Good afternoon. I'm the Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford, and before we begin, can I ask you to please silence your cell phones so that we may be fully present here. I welcome you all to this time of memory, reflection, and celebration of life. Now, this temporary congregation is a diverse group. We bring many different understandings about the meaning of life to this ceremony and many different hopes for what lies beyond this life. We honor those differences and we celebrate the fact that they are transcended by what unites us, our relationship with Rachel and her family, our grief for our loss, our hope that we may be of support to each other and to her family, and our intention to honor and celebrate her life and take what we most need and admire into our own lives. Rachel Agnes Martin Kendall went by many names: Rachel, Grandma, Mommy, Aunt Rachel, Tootsie, and the mother at home. She was dearly loved by so many people, and her passing leaves a void. When death comes quicker than we anticipate, as it did for Rachel, there's something deep within our human nature that calls us to rage against the dying of the light, in the words of Dylan Thomas. Death is like life in that they are two constants of the human condition. Death and life unite us together in our own humanity. When death comes after a life well lived, as it did for Rachel, then our grief is tempered by the recognition of all that we have gained from knowing that life. But when death comes at all, our spirits rage against the dying of the light. We grieve not only for the loss of our friend and loved one, but also we grieve for this reminder that life is transient, fragile, and precious. We grieve our own mortality, reflected in the life of the one whom we will miss deeply. Do not be perplexed by any emotions that you may feel right now. They come from your connection to Rachel and your connection to your own humanity. They may be loss, regret, or deep sadness. There may be relief that her death happened without a long period of suffering. Such is natural, and it's part of your connection to Rachel, part of being human. Do not deny your emotions, accept them, try to understand them. They are doors into life's deeper meanings. Death always brings us face to face with life. There is opportunity in this moment for us to begin to live again, to recommit to living fully, loving extravagantly, and being all that we are called to be in this world. The paradox of such an occasion as this is that death calls us to life and to living. In the words of Robinson Jeffers, "You were faithful and a lion heart, but the ashes have fallen, and the flame has gone up. Nothing human remains. You are earth and air. You are in the beauty of the ocean and the great streaming triumphs of sundown. You are alive and well in the tender young grass rejoicing. When soft rain falls all night and little rosy fleeced clouds float on the dawn." Rachel Agnes Martin Kendall was born June 24th, 1922 in Assumption, Illinois, the daughter of the Reverend Elmer S. and Catherine Self Martin. Being the daughter of a minister who was called to different places, she grew up living in many different areas: Illinois, Athens, Texas, Weatherford, Texas, and Milwaukee. She had 3 brothers, Kenneth, Elmer, and Donald, and a sister, Eloise, who died when Rachel was only 10. As a child, Rachel was shy and introverted. That didn't change much during her life, but she was also purposeful and adventuresome, a complex combination. She graduated high school in Milwaukee, then graduation from Park College in Missouri in 1944. Being at this school during World War II exposed her to new people. Navy service people came to school there, and the president of the college arranged for some of the Nisei youth whose parents were internment camps to attend. Rachel loved music and dancing, like big band. She won a dancing contest in college, although very humbly she would still give credit to her dancing partner. She wasn't really what we would call today a partier, but she greatly enjoyed life. After graduation, she spent a little bit of time back at home before moving to New York City to be roommates with her cousin. A single career girl, she got a job as a secretary with the Board of National Missions of the Presbyterian Church headquarters, and she enjoyed herself, going to shows and buying clothes, which remained a lifelong enjoyment for her. Along about this time, her brother Donald graduated from college and went to seminary. His professor came to Milwaukee for Donald's ordination, and he heard Rachel's mother giving her a little bit of grief about not being married and being too picky. The professor said, "I think I have someone for you." He gave her information to a young minister, the Reverend Nevin E. Kendall. Nevin began writing to Rachel, and in Thanksgiving of 1948, she took a train and met him in Philadelphia for dinner and a show. Now, he apparently knew fairly quickly on that he wanted to marry her, but she was more careful. They got to know each other through a long-distance relationship. And he came to New York to visit her for an activity-filled week of shows, dinner, dancing. She told her daughters that by the end of this week, she was completely exhausted. But she was apparently very much in love. They got engaged, and on December 31st, 1949, her father officiated at their wedding. After having been a Presbyterian preacher's daughter, she had vowed that she would never, ever, ever become the wife of a Presbyterian minister. As they say, make plans, God laughs. She was now exactly that. They lived in Purseglove, West Virginia for 6 months, with Nevin serving at the Shack, which was a Presbyterian mission that served the mining community. And then they moved to Philadelphia, where Nevin worked for the Board of Christian Education. And they were there till 1958, and during that time, their daughters, Anita and Jennifer, were born. After that, they moved to a suburb of Buffalo, New York, where Rachel was firmly in the role of the preacher's wife for 7 years. It must have been challenging, as introverted as she was, but her role as mother was always her top priority. She would tell them, as the minister's daughters, people will think that you should behave like angels, but you don't have to. They went through more job transitions, living in Ohio for a year, then outside of D.C. and Maryland for another year. In 1965, they moved to Elkins, where Nevin became a development officer for Davis and Elkins College, and they would remain there for 30 years. Rachel often traveled with her husband on his business trips and enjoyed being near Anita and her children, Susan and Alan. And they really loved living in Elkins. They built a nice home. They took lovely vacations. They were snowbirds for about 18 years, going back and forth to Florida. In 1999, they sold their house in West Virginia and they moved to Ormond Beach, Florida. And Rachel really had fun there, doing things with Nevin, walking on the beach, grocery shopping, even cooking together. Her adventuresome side loved being able to go to Cape Kennedy for the launches. And she was, her entire life, avidly curious about everything. In 2005, Nevin died. He had been sick for a while, bedridden. Rachel wasn't having fun anymore, and they talked about coming to Austin, and they developed an agreement. When Nevin died, she would move, and that's exactly what happened. In March 2006, Rachel moved to Austin and here into the Renaissance. She enjoyed having her own apartment. She liked getting up early and seeing the deer on her way down to breakfast. She loved both her alone time, which her introverted soul had probably always craved, and she also enjoyed having friends, especially the ones that she would join for meals. And she was very deliberate. This didn't happen accidentally. She was deliberate about reinventing herself now that she was on her own and making the decision to kind of push herself out of that introvertedness to be more social and to develop relationships. And her adventuresome side, too, was also fed. She went on many trips with her daughters, cruises, road trips, and now she got to be with Jennifer's family, spending all of the holidays and birthdays at their house, which they, too, of course, also loved. She was very funny and would frequently say things that apparently would surprise everyone, joking with her dry wit. And her daughters say that she never complained. She was always appreciative and grateful. Her daughters, though grieving their loss, are grateful too. Their mother had a really good, long life filled with love and adventure. She was never really sick. Her mind was sharp to the end, and she knew that she was loved. Rachel Agnes Martin Kendall was wonderful and complex. She was shy but spirited, introverted but spunky. I believe the term used was firecracker. She loved root beer floats, clothes shopping, and getting answers to all of the questions that her curious mind kept coming up with. She loved her family deeply, and she took good care of them. And in the last 10 years, she gave them the great gift of allowing them some measure of taking care of her. She will be missed. And now her grandson, Danny Swan, will share some reflections on her life.
The first thing that I have to share this afternoon is from her granddaughter, Susan. She says, "I'm so sorry that I couldn't be here today because I always really enjoyed visiting my grandma at the Wren. It's a great community, and it was just what she needed over the past 10 years or so. It's still hard for me to believe that she's gone, that I won't get any more emails or Facebook posts from her, that I won't get to stay at the Rock House there to visit her anymore. Honestly, the older and perhaps more frail she got, the more invincible she seemed to me. I am extremely fortunate to have a lifetime of memories with my grandparents. Not all kids are lucky enough to grow up in the town where their grandparents are. But more importantly, not everyone is lucky enough to still have their grandparents well into adulthood. It is a blessing to get to know the elderly family members in our lives when we are old enough to appreciate the unique journeys of their lives, to recognize the best qualities of them as people, and to really get to know them. I am especially grateful to have had plenty of visits with Grandma, despite the distance. She was so tech-savvy, and that helped us stay connected. I have frequently bragged that my 90-plus-year-old grandma keeps up with me on Facebook and by email. She was really something else. Her very last email to me explained that there's this group of you who eat lunch together and that you talk about some of the craziest subjects, as she put it. You are wondering how flocks of geese flying in formation decides who leads, Or who will take over if the lead bird falls out? I work at a wildlife refuge that hosts migrating geese by the thousands, and I've watched more than my share of flocks in flight. I'll never look at them quite the same again. I'll always think of her. Ironically, she told me the answer was not urgent, except it turns out that it was urgent, but she had no way to know that. The answer to your question about how they decide who leads is that they take turns. Leading is hard, so they switch positions pretty often, and every bird does their share of leading. I thank you for your friendship to her and her life at the Wren, full of discussions about the craziest subjects, because I'm confident that those are the very things that kept her around so long for the rest of us and her family to enjoy. From one of Rachel's great-granddaughters, Susan's daughter. My name is Allison Rachel Gutierrez. I am very happy because I have her name in my name. I am also lucky and happy that I got to meet my great-grandmother. The last comes from me. It was not until right after my mom let me know that my grandmother had passed that I realized how long she had been here. In moments like this, I sort of reflexively do the math to get an objective sense of how long something has been happening for. And I was shocked, astonished to realize that it had been an entire decade that she'd been here. I guess it's really easy to have something present and not really realize what's going on. In contrast to my lack of awareness, everyone who ever met her always remarked on her. I'm a graduate student at the University of Texas, and I have the good fortune of living near my family and having the opportunity to spend Christmases and Thanksgivings and birthdays, all sorts of celebrations with my family. And not everybody that I go to school with has that opportunity. So I try and be certain to invite people over on these events so that they don't have to be alone on the holidays. They can feel like they're part of a family, part of a celebration. And inevitably, later on, after having been to dinner with my family, I'd see them at school or at a party, and they would say, you know, how are your parents doing? And I'd say, oh, they're doing fine. They'd nod. They'd say, how's your brother doing? He's good. And they'd say, okay. And they'd kind of pause and look at me and go, how is your grandma? Something about her was so compelling, so interesting. All the stories she had, all the things that she remembered, how clear and concise and present she was just obvious to everyone. But it's not her stories or her memory that I will remember. Truthfully, I didn't know my grandmother all that well until she moved to Austin. Unlike Susan and Alan, I live very far away from them. And I think that by the time I was an adult, old enough to really appreciate her, my grandfather was very sick, and a lot of her energy went towards taking care of him. And so honestly, she was kind of cranky when I saw her a lot of the time. But when she moved here, she became someone very different. Joanna talked about this spunky, spirited firecracker, this dry wit. And what I will remember is the family dinners. My family is very loud, one might say raucous. We're sitting at dinner, we're talking, we're shouting, we're laughing, and all of a sudden, kind of floating across the table would come this quiet little sharp kind of joke, and we would all stop, astonished, and turn to her and say, "What did you just say?" And she would say, "Oh, nothing, don't." I'd say, "No, it was so funny." And I wish that I could remember a specific instance. I can't, unfortunately. I don't have her wonderful memory. I have merely regular memory, not a superhuman memory. But I am left with that strong impression, because I feel like it happened every time that we saw her. Every time we'd see her, one really good joke would come. And that's what I'll remember. That is what I will mourn. Rest in peace, Grandma.
We all live on in the stories and the reflections of others, and we hope that you will continue telling your stories of Rachel at the reception here following this service. And now we pause to gather our individual feelings and thoughts to remember the woman who was, how she touched our lives and how our lives touched her life. To meditate upon the meaning of this occasion and to focus on a memory, one memory that portrays what Rachel means in our lives. Will you join me in a moment of silence? Christina Rossetti wrote this poem. It's titled, Remember. Remember me when I am gone away, gone far away into the silent land, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I half turn to go, yet turning stay. Remember me when no more day by day you tell me of our future that you planned. Only remember me, you understand. It will be late to counsel then or pray. Yet if you should forget me for a while, and afterwards remember, do not grieve, for if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had, better by far that you should forget and smile than you remember and be sad. Let us offer a prayer for all of our memories of Rachel. Our God, who calls each of us beloved, we give thanks for the life of Rachel, Agnes, Martin, Kendall, for her lively love, for her loyalty, for her wisdom, for her friendship. Though we know that her spirit lives on in our lives, we also honor our sadness. Grant us a healing of our hearts bit by bit and day by day, that we can soon find an easing of our loss and a zest in our lives again. Help us to take the values of Rachel's life into our own lives and live fully with them, that she might live in us and with us for all of our days. We honor Rachel with this prayer, which she requested for her husband's funeral and intended for her own. O Lord, support us all the day long, until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world lies hushed and the fever of life is over and our work is done. Then in thy mercy grant us a safe lodging and a holy rest and peace at last. And would you please join me in the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Rachel's family would like to invite you to a reception here. It's going to be over in the card room, where you can continue in your remembrances of her life. The poet Mary Oliver has written, "To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go." We let go the life of Rachel Kendall in light of the promise, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." We leave her in peace with our thoughts of love and tenderness, and let her spirit go to the everlasting love of God.
tree.